The biggest F1 fantasy story this weekend came from the FIA's ruling in Monaco, and it could have big implications for your team moving forward. I'm going to break down what changed, who benefits, and everything else you need to know from Friday's practice sessions. We've got to dive right into the news that dropped on Friday morning. Alpine's appeal was successful, and the FIA reinstated Pierre Gasly's P3 finish at Monaco last weekend. That means Gasly moves up from P7, and that drops Isaac Hadjar, Oscar Piastri, Liam Lawson, and Arvid Lindblad all down one spot. What happened here was that the pit entry barriers were moved for 2026, but the FIA didn't update the setup distance for the pit lane that's published to the teams. So when the teams set their pit limiters, the actual distance between the timing loops was 77 centimeters shorter than what they planned for. And that means the drivers that hugged the new pit entry line were clocked at 0.1 kph above the pit lane speed limit. Alpine was the only team to submit their right to review within the 96-hour period, but reports are starting to surface that McLaren and Red Bull have requested time to review the facts and appeal the appeal. So here's how the Pierre Gasly ruling impacts F1 fantasy if this result is final. Gasly jumps from 12 points up to 25, Hadjar down from 23 to 19, Lindblad goes from 21 to 18, Lawson from 16 points to 13, and Oscar Piastri drops from 19 points to 16. This has some budget implications too, since Gasly originally dropped 0.6 million, and with the change, he'd be due to rise 0.2 million. The big question now is, when will F1 Fantasy make these changes? Earlier today, we saw this note on the app. It tells us that F1 Fantasy won't be changing anything until after Barcelona. So everyone's price change targets stays the same heading into our lineup block deadline this weekend, and that also means that Gasly's going to cost 0.8 million more than we'd hoped. It's the 0.2 million that he didn't gain and the 0.6 million that he lost. If we assume for a minute that no other appeals change the results of Monaco, does that mean Gasly could have a 0.8 million price increase next week when they sort all this out? It might just be worth picking them this week to find out. Lost in the news of Gasly's podium was a correction earlier in the week on Nico Hulkenberg's price. We talked about this on our preview show on Monday, and that Hulk was supposed to lose 0.6 million, and at the time had only gone down 0.3 million. F1 Fantasy updated his price later that day, so he can only lose a maximum of 0.2 million this week. Plus, he has achievable price gain targets this week, so I plan on picking up the Audi veteran for my team. Here are the latest betting lines, and we didn't have these earlier in the week since it took so long to sort out the mess after Monaco. Now, despite everything we saw in the timing sheets, Vegas still has Mercedes 1-2 favorites to win on Sunday. This tells me a few things. First, there must be some more pace in Antonelli's car. He gave up his seat to Fred Vesti in FP1, so maybe Mercedes went heavier on the race pace sims, and Vegas sniffed that out in these updated betting lines. Russell was only 9/1000ths back from Norris in FP2, and he had the best first sector of anyone on the grid, so this could be a nice bounce back race for George. Norris P1 on the timing sheets, but a pretty distant P3 in these betting lines. Terry hit me with a great point just before I hit record on this video. Lando didn't have any fastest sectors in FP2. So even though he put together the best lap, Vegas believes that everyone behind him still has more time to gain. McLaren didn't get a ton of respect in these lines, but Ferrari are buried as it stands right now. Remember, Leclerc and Hamilton were P1 and P2 the same time last week, and now they're P6 and P7. They're behind the two Mercedes, the two McLarens, and Max Verstappen. This is one more data point in favor of making a shift to McLaren this week. If this video is helping you, please be sure to give it a like. This is our first year releasing our final thoughts, so likes and comments will let us know if we should keep it up as the season unfolds. Now that all of the Monaco updates are out of the way, we can finally get on to Barcelona. The upgrade list has one big outlier, and that's Ferrari with 8 changes, and no one else this weekend brought more than 2. Headlining those changes for Ferrari are a new front wing and a new floor, so some big changes we've got to look out for as the weekend unfolds. If we look over to FP1, we had 7 rookies in for this session, so a bunch of fantasy-relevant drivers sat it out. Luke Browning was in Alex Albon's car, but the team couldn't get it going during the hour, so only 21 drivers classified. Interesting news at the top of the grid because we had Russell, followed by Piastri, then Leclerc. So it was our first sign that McLaren could jump Ferrari as the number 2 constructor in F1 fantasy. Paul Aaron had an absolute scorcher in Hulkenberg's car to put him P8, and as usual, the Cadillacs and Aston Martins finished at the bottom of the table. FP2 was an up and down session for the Racing Bulls. We had both drivers in the top 10 in the opening few laps, which gave us some hope that they could make it back-to-back points appearances. But Liam Lawson retired 20 minutes in with a gearbox issue. Remember, this is a team with 2 Grand Prix DNFs and 2 Sprint DNFs, so reliability is going to be a question for those of us considering running Lawson and Lindblad this weekend. Another big step up here for McLaren as they finished P1 and P3 ahead of the championship leaders. We're looking at a real decision now between Ferrari and McLaren for our second constructor. If you're a week late on a shift at the top of the grid, that's 30 plus points you're leaving on the table. So FP3 is going to be crucial to helping us make the right decision. Let's read a comment from our video at the top of the week. This one comes from our friend Joe Malazzo. Joe says, Limitless may best be used later in the season when hopefully reliability issues improve as they're hitting every team right now. Monaco's definitely scared me off of Limitless for the next few races. Silverstone is the next sprint race, but that's only in 3 weeks, so I'd be looking at Zandvoort coming out of the summer break as the next time to use it. It's a sprint weekend where teams should have their reliability sorted out, and since there aren't too many ultra-low overtaking tracks left on the calendar, I'd go back to our old strategy and pick a sprint weekend for Limitless if you haven't used it already. Here are the updated buy and sell rankings after free practice 2. McLaren are the big movers here, jumping into the buy category, but of course, I'm concerned about their reliability. Both drivers are likely to lose value, so I'd still avoid them. In Tier B, we've put these drivers in order of how I'd take them. Liam Lawson and his negative price gain targets first, then Hulkenberg, who's 0.2 million off the price floor second, then the most consistent driver in this tier, and that's Franco Colapinto. Pierre Gasly could have some big price changes coming out of this week, so I have him next on the list. Lindblad has the pace in the Racing Bulls, so I'm okay with a possible price drop this week, followed by Hadjar, Ocon, and Bortoleto based on your cost cap. Here are my top F1 fantasy lineups after free practice 2 for Barcelona. This first team is taking advantage of a potential big price change from Pierre Gasly. It's Antonelli, Gasly, Lawson, Lindblad, Hulkenberg, Mercedes, and Ferrari. It costs 109.9 million and brings in those cost cap builders like Lawson, Hulkenberg, and potentially Gasly too. Lindblad looks good in the top 10, and consider this. If he scores just 8 points this week, he'll need negative 13 points for a cost cap gain in Australia, so I'm happy to get him in 1 race early. Remember, Gasly could get a 0.8 million price boost once the game sorts out the points from Monaco, so he's a risk worth taking. This second team looks to capitalize on McLaren's form in the early sessions. It's got the usual suspects of Antonelli, Colapinto, and Lawson, with the form of Lindblad and the price floor potential of Hulkenberg. But now, we have McLaren in for Ferrari as the second constructor. This team costs 112.3 million, so it's a bit of a luxury for those of us with bigger budgets, but if you go from Colapinto to Bortoleto, this same team can be had for 108.3 million. This is going to be a tempting last-minute pivot for many of us. And now we're weighing the potential of McLaren making a run at the race win versus the cost cap game potential as the game corrects for Pierre Gasly. So these two lineups are going to be neck and neck for me. We'll be back to sweat it out with these final lineup decisions 1 hour before qualifying at 9 a.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. in the UK, right here on the FanAmp YouTube channel. Until then, thanks so much for watching.